Welcome to the December meeting of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting. My name is Tom Byrne, RTM moderator. As all members have received a copy of the call for tonight's meeting, the reading of the call will be omitted. Will everyone please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As all members have received a copy of the minutes of our October 25 meeting, the reading of the minutes will be omitted. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Mr. Clark, District 7.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm in the unenviable position of having to amend my own emendation. About 10 lines down, William Clark of District 7 stated there were a few typos. On William Clark of District 7, about 10 lines down, stated that there were a few typos on page 1, 12th line. After, it should read, instead of "and" the word school, insert a semicolon. So strike and replace with after.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other corrections to the minutes of our October meeting? Hearing none and absent objection, the minutes as amended stand adopted. Bob Richardson, who chaired the special committee on the Nathaniel Witherell.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you all. I'd like to give you a brief update on Nathaniel Witherell. Fred DeCaro and I met with Chairman Ron Dreskin and board member Donald Fritz on December 2nd. The board is meeting about twice a month and working diligently to understand the operation and all the factors affecting both the care provided to residents and financial performance. First and foremost, the board is focused on determining what the appropriate business model for Witherell should be going forward. The only significant conclusions they have reached so far are that they will never recommend that Witherell should be closed, and they will take or recommend whatever steps are necessary to keep the nursing home open. They have taken steps to use the $100,000 which we appropriated in October by having the purchasing department issue 2 requests for proposals, one for the fundraising feasibility study and the other for consulting services with respect to preparation of a business plan. The fundraising study is expected to be finished by April 15th and the report relating to the business plan by March 15th. Following determination of the business model, the design of the new building will be adjusted to conform to the business model and a building committee will be formed. Based on this approach, they estimate that construction of the new building will begin 18 to 24 months later than the July 15, 2005 date specified in the agreed settlement with the Department of Social Services, which will, of course, be requested to approve the changes. With respect to the current financial situation, Witherell has had an operating deficit for the first 4 months ending October 31st on an enterprise basis of $339,000, which is $134,000 better than their budget. However, Medicare rehab revenues were $757,000 or 49% below budget. This shortfall was partly offset by Medicaid revenues exceeding budget by $464,000 or almost 17%. All major expense categories were below budget. Because of the rehab shortfall, a worthwhile effort is being made to promote a closer working relationship with Greenwich Hospital. On the whole, I think the board is proceeding in a sound manner, and they're doing so carefully and thoroughly. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Randy Huffman, Chair of the Budget Overview Committee.
Good evening. I asked Tom to give me a minute to just give you a brief update with regard to the Budget Overview Committee. We have been meeting this fall, completing the review of budgets from this last term with our meetings with each of the departments, and looking forward to our revision of our materials and our approach to a budget review for this next year. We would urge that all members of the RTM look carefully at the materials that Val Storm forwarded through the call package to you for this budget development season, and we would hope that everyone would take an active part in the development of that budget, including particularly through each of your committees and their reviews of particular departmental budgets. At the same time, we have embarked upon a review of the operating budgets of comparable or similar municipalities in other parts of the country. We will be hoping to develop for you a report on that, which will be circulated to the RTM. We also have on our agenda a review of the process by which we are now developing the capital budget for future years. And we think that in conjunction with that, it is appropriate for there to be a serious analysis and discussion of the use or decision to not to use any capital project financing going forward in the future. Finally, we will be looking toward the status of the efforts that have been made for the outcome-based budgeting process. And we believe that at the same time, we should do a further review and an audit of the various capital projects as they are completed in town, and as we look to the costs that each of those should properly incur into the future. We welcome participation of all in our meetings. We will be sending out notices when we will include, when we will schedule some of these interviews with some of the people on these capital projects. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank all the members and their guests who came to our dinner last month. There are some pictures on the back wall, but I did want to say it was a very nice occasion. I want to thank Claire Simonelli of District 12 and Carol Ducray of District 6 and their crew who helped set up and organize. So thank you all for coming, and thanks to them for a job well done. And one final note before we get to the call tonight. I did send out a reminder to all district and committee chairs that our rules provide for electing a new delegate to a committee where a delegate has missed more than 50% of the meetings for the calendar year in the first year of our 2-year term. And I've asked all committee chairs to let me know how many people, if any, fall into that category so we can alert the districts and replacements can be selected next month. All right, that brings us to the call for tonight's meeting. Yes, I did. I'm sorry. Val Storms, Chair of the BET Budget Committee. I'm sorry.
Mr. Moderator, members of town meeting, good evening. Randy's done half my job for me here, but nevertheless, I did want to say a few words to you. I was going to call your attention to the schedules that are in your call this month, and just remind you that all of our meetings are, of course, open public meetings, and we do urge your participation. It's a chance for you to come and learn all you can about these budgets before you get to your final approval in May. And another thing I'd like to say is that both the BET and the First Selectman are focused right now on finding ways to provide for more public input into the capital improvement projects process. And to this end, for the first time during the public hearing in February, there'll be a portion of that hearing which will be devoted to this process. And we will be talking about the process itself, how it works, the schedule. There'll be explanations for projects that have been either accelerated or deferred, and there'll be explanations for the scoring of projects where there are questions about that. So please come. We hope to see you there.
Thank you. Did I forget anyone else? All right. That brings us to the call for tonight's meeting. Pursuant to our consent calendar, I have notified all districts and committee chairs that I am designating to be placed upon our consent calendar 4 items. So I will do that now, and as you know, we don't hear committee reports on these items, and we have no discussion of these items. So the first item is item 2, which is a resolution to accept a grant of $4,525 from the Area 9 Cable Council, and that grant to be added to an account upon allotment by the BET. The second item I am placing on the consent calendar is item 7, which is the appointment of Joan Faust to be a member of the Historic District Commission with a term expiring March 31, 2006. The third item is item 9, the appointment of Phyllis Sheridan to be a member of the Historic District Commission with a term expiring March 31, 2006. And the last of the consent items, item 15, which is a resolution to accept a gift of kitchen improvements at the Coscob Community Center, the gift valued at $5,000. So those items are now on the consent calendar. Mr. Boutel, for what purpose do you rise? Uh-huh. Okay. Is that 09? Ms. Jenkins? Item 7 is a term expiring in 2009? Okay. Okay. The call information is correct. That was my error. The expiration of the term is March 31st, 2009. Okay. So those 4 items are now on our consent calendar. Do we have any objections to them being on the consent calendar? Here, Joan Caldwell, District 10.
Mr. Moderator, I understand that Mrs. Faust is a renomination. No. Is that not reflected in the resolution?
Well, that's not. I'm not contradicting that. I'm saying the resolution is to appoint her as a member. I'm not saying this is her first term, but that's what we are doing. We are appointing her, and it may in fact be a reappointment. Okay. Mr. Von Kaiserling, District 8. All right, will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, consent calendar items 2, 7, 9, and 15, and proceed to poll your delegation. Now, in a minute, I will suggest a motion to suspend the rules for the purpose of combining items. But before I do that, let me first say that items 8 and 13 have been withdrawn. I was informed tonight that item 13 has been withdrawn. And I think we all knew that item 8 was being withdrawn. And clearly one of the items we will take up separately is the appropriation for deer control. That's item 11. And there are sign-up sheets both as you enter the auditorium and in the front. I anticipate that there will be a motion to limit debate offered. So I encourage anyone who desires to speak to put your name on those lists. I'll leave them out until we reach the item. But you should, if you want to protect your right to speak, you should put your name on one of those lists. All right. Based on the reports of our districts and committees, it was the consensus to combine items 1, 3, 4, 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18 for voting purposes. Is there such a motion to suspend the rules? It has been moved and seconded to suspend the rules to combine items 1, 3, 4, 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18 for voting purposes. The motion to suspend the rules is not debatable, and it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of combining items 1, 3, 4, 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. That will leave, to be considered separately, by the way, items 5, 6, 11, and 17. So item 1 now comes before us. Dr. Susan Wallerstein of the Greenwich Public Schools.
Resolved that the town of Greenwich accept a grant for $45,603 for the English as a Second Language program. Said grant to become an appropriation that the Board of Education may add to the appropriate accounts.
Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 1 has been moved and seconded. Bob Brady, Chair of our Education Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, fellow members of the RTM, guests. Your Education Committee met last Monday night to consider item 1, to accept the grant, English as a Second Language grant. I should study that. The committee had during last Monday, one defect became apparent, and that is the original resolution failed to grant anybody the authority to spend the money. And we discussed that at our meeting. We also discovered during the meeting that there is a typographical error, and the original resolution called for a $46,603 grant. In fact, we were receiving only $45,603. We discussed the items, and with the Mr. Spang and Mr. Chris Winters, who's the coordinator for his title is here somewhere, ESL and Foreign Language Coordinator, and they agreed that they would return with a corrected substitute resolution, and which would be the $45,000 and provide for authority to spend the money. And we voted 11-0-0 to recommend approval of such a resolution were it brought before us, which I believe it has been. District 8 was unrepresented. Mr. Winters explained the way the money would be used. $23,103 for textbooks to support foreign language work, $17,000 to improve school parent communications by providing translation of various Board of Education documents into Spanish and to Japanese, so that when the kids bring things home, the parents can in fact read them. $3,000 to support the Greenwich High School Vision Club, and $2,500 to provide transportation on field trips. The money is provided. It is on based on No Child Left Behind federal money. It is a one-time grant. It's administered by the state, which is the direct contributor to ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua Brown, Chair of our Finance Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, the Finance Committee met last Monday night with 11 districts present and voting. District 9 was absent. We did not have the pleasure of anybody from the Board of Ed or the school system helping us with this item. We presumed it was a matter that we've seen before as dealing with funding for this program. We had talked to Dr. Wallerstein during the day, and due to their budget discussions, we were unsupported. However, understanding what the use of this money was and the general source of it, we also were anticipating a substitute resolution to include the appropriation of the funds, and voted 11-0-0 in favor of the item.
Thank you. Discussion on the substitute resolution for item 1. Item 3 now comes before us. Ed Gomo, Town Administrator.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, item number 3, resolved that the first selectman be and is hereby authorized for and on behalf of the town to accept the conveyance of a parcel of land from the State of Connecticut Department of Transportation containing 1.3 acres and located on the easterly side of Spring House Road.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 3 has been moved and seconded. Franklin Bloomer with the report of our Land Use Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members of the town meeting, good evening. The Land Use Committee met last Monday evening, and we considered items 3 and 4 together and voted on them together, and I will report on them now together. Both of these resolutions relate to the acceptance of conveyances of small parcels of land that are in the vicinity of the Merritt Parkway from the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Item 3, the item that's currently before us, relates to a 1.3 acre parcel on Springhouse Road, which is the last right-hand turn off Round Hill Road before the Merritt Parkway as you head north. This parcel is not contiguous to the Merritt Parkway. The other parcel, the one that is the subject of item 4, is a 2.4 acre parcel on Riversville Road, which is immediately north of the Merritt Parkway, and it is contiguous to the Merritt. Neither parcel is large enough to be a building lot and could only be used for residential development if combined with other land. The deeds for both parcels require the town to retain the land and use it for open space purposes. Our vote on both of these items, as I say, we took a combined vote, was 11 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. District 2 was absent at the time of the vote.
Thank you. Doug Wells, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, our committee took up this item last Monday evening. Speaking on behalf of the item was Gene McLaughlin, Assistant Town Attorney, who provided our committee with some of the legal background behind this, the conveyance. This conveyance was made pursuant to a special act that passed July of 2003, Special Act 03-19, which permits the state to give real property to towns across the state. Mr. McLaughlin explained that the method by which this conveyance should take place is pursuant to our charter number 99, I believe. He said it was section 99, which provide that it first must be approved by planning and zoning, which I understand has been done. He also explained that there was an environmental study done on the property. No hazardous waste was found on either this lot or the lot which is the subject matter of item 4. There is consideration to the state for $1,000, which the town will pay, which is designed only to defray the cost, the state's cost in making this conveyance. He explained further this is a tax revenue neutral conveyance. The state was not paying us any tax dollars, and now this money is going into open space. There will be no revenues to the town generated either. At least one member of our committee was concerned about whether or not there might be additional maintenance costs associated with this property. Nobody could really help us with that particular item other than Mr. McLaughlin did indicate that this was mostly wooded area, as was the property in item 4, and so there wasn't expected to be any maintenance costs to the town. Our vote was 11-0-0 with District 11 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 3. All right, before I call for the next item, I have the results of the vote on the consent items. Those were items 2, acceptance of a grant from the Area 9 Cable Council. And by the way, I want to thank again Paul Curtis and Jenny Larkin, who is assisting him tonight. Tonight we're taping the meeting. It is not going out live, but again, thank you for your efforts in broadcasting this to the town. Item 7, appointment of Joan Faust. Item 9, appointment of Phyllis Sheridan. And item 15, acceptance of a $5,000 gift of kitchen improvements. The vote, 180 in favor, none opposed, and no abstentions. Those 4 items have carried. Continuing with our combined items, item 4 now comes before us. Mr. Gomo.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, item number 4. Resolved that the first selectman be and is hereby authorized for and on behalf of the town to accept the conveyance of a parcel of land from the State of Connecticut Department of Transportation containing 2.40 acres and situated on the northwesterly side of Connecticut Route 15, Merritt Parkway.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 4 has been moved and seconded. We've heard the report of our Land Use Committee. Mr. Wells, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We took up this item last Monday evening. I provided most of the information concerning this as well, except for the fact that the call is incorrect in that it makes reference to the same lot of land as is described in item number 3. However, our committee members received either by email or by regular mail the item 4 that is actually before the RTM this evening, which is for 2.4 acres. And on the item that was sent to us later on, the 2.4 acres, our vote was 11-0-0 with District 11 absent.
Thank you. And the correct resolution was in the explanatory comments and was also posted on the town clerk's bulletin board. All right, discussion on item 4. All right, item 10 now comes before us. Once again, Ed Gomo.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, item 10. Resolved that the representative town meeting appoint the Historic District Commission as the Historic Property Study Committee for the purpose of investigating a proposed historic property owned by Mr. and Mrs. Frank Snyder and located at 640 Round Hill Road in accordance with Section 7-147Q, Section A of the Connecticut General Statutes.
Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 10 has been moved and seconded. Franklin Bloomer with the Land Use Committee report.
The Land Use Committee considered this item last Monday evening. We had Christopher Holbrook, who is the chairman of the Historic District Commission, with us to help us. This is the first step in the designation of the property at 640 Round Hill Road as an historic property. You may recall that the RTM went through a similar procedure earlier this term in connection with property on Taconic Road. What this resolution does is to appoint the Historic District Commission to serve as an historic properties study committee for the purpose of investigating and reporting on the designation of this property as an historic property. Following the completion of the study committee's report, the proposed designation will come back to us, come back to the RTM, and we will act on an ordinance which contains a meets and bounds description of the property and formally designates the property as an historic property. The effect of the designation as an historic property is that a single property, just one lot, has restrictions placed on its future development similar to those that are applicable to properties in an historic district. 640 Round Hill Road is at the corner of Round Hill Road and Creamer Hill Road. If you're familiar with it, it's a remarkably well-preserved period house. The owners have expanded it slightly, but when they expanded it using components taken from other period houses, so it has retained its character to a remarkable degree. The property is part of a parcel of approximately 16 acres. The designation would apply to 4 of those acres which contain the house. There is another 4-acre parcel being deeded to the owner's son, who has built a house there. The remaining 6 acres are being given to the Greenwich Land Trust. Our vote was 11 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions, with District 2 absent at the time of the vote.
Thank you. Discussion on item 10. Item 12 now comes before us. Joe Siciliano, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Good evening. Item 12, resolved that the Town of Greenwich accept a gift in the amount of $22,500 as reimbursement for the Independence Day fireworks celebration.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 12 has been moved and seconded. Karen Sadiq-Khan, Chair of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
Mr. Siciliano, Director of Parks and Rec, attended the committee meeting last Tuesday night and explained that this is a reimbursement for the fireworks for 2004. This is from Greenwich Capital Markets. This is an ongoing program of them donating the money. This covers the fireworks that were at Greenwich High School and Binney Park. This donation enables the department and the Old Greenwich Riverside Community Center to offer these 2 fireworks displays each July 4th. Greenwich Capital Markets has been making this donation for a number of years, I think probably 8 years or more. Our vote was 11-0-0 with District 8 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 12. Item 14 now comes before us. Mr. Siciliano.
Item 14, resolved that the Town of Greenwich accept a gift for a picnic pavilion valued at $100,000 from the Greenwich Rotary and the Barham-Coscob Rotary Clubs.
Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 14 has been moved and seconded. Who's going to start? Ms. Sadiq-Khan with the report of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
Mr. Siciliano attended our meeting to discuss the gift, and Chuck Hilton of the Rotary made a presentation to us giving the background of the gift and the details of how the pavilion will be installed. In 2002, the master plan for Byram Park included a plan to renovate the pavilion. And then 6 months ago, the Rotary clubs came to Mr. Siciliano to discuss projects they were considering for their 100th anniversary. The idea of a new pavilion was agreed upon. There is already $40,000 in the department's budget appropriation for a pavilion upgrade, and that will be used for the foundation and bathroom. The foundation will be made of concrete and stone. Approximately 50 reservations are made each season for using this pavilion. The fees are based upon the number of people included in the reservation. This is a similar arrangement to the clam bake area at Greenwich Point. A few more details. The new pavilion will be closer to the field house. Permits are expected to be issued in December for the project. If they move along as expected in January and are approved, the pavilion will be installed in the spring. Foundation work will start as soon as the ground is in the right condition to work on, depending on the weather. It will take 4 to 6 weeks to erect the structure. The goal is to have the project ready for Memorial Day. Our vote was 11-0-0 with District 8 absent.
Thank you. Mr. Brown with the report of our Finance Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, and guests, the Finance Committee last Monday night with the same 2 individuals presenting at our discussion. We covered much of the same ground. 2 points was that we did ask, did they have the money already in hand, which they indicated they did. And the second was that they will be utilizing the existing pavilion area for parking and service and access. We applaud the project and we thank the Rotary for their very fine service. Thank you. Our vote was 11-0-0 with District 9 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 16. I'm sorry, item 14. Item 16 now comes before us. Mr. Siciliano.
Item 16, resolved that the Town of Greenwich accept a gift for ornamental trees and shrubs plantings for the purpose of screening the parking garage adjacent to the Upper Havemeyer Recreational Playing Field valued at $25,000 from Sam Bridge Nursery.
Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 16 has been moved and seconded. Karen Sadiq-Khan with the report of the Parks and Recreation Committee.
Mr. Siciliano presented the information regarding this gift to our committee. This, to me, is a very clear-cut and simple gift. It's going to be used in the garage area located in the rear of 40 West Elm Street, where condominiums are, and that area abuts the Greenwich Common near the Upper Havermeyer playing fields. The plantings will include evergreen and deciduous ornamental trees and shrubs. The planting design and plants will be donated by Sam Bridge. The design meets the approval of the tree warden and superintendent of parks and was presented to and approved by the Board of Parks and Recreation. An additional note, which I think is what I was pleased to hear, is that Sam Bridge would like to make a donation of this sort annually and would like to work with the Parks and Rec Department to get ideas for what future planting projects might be. The vote on this was 11-0-0 with District 8 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 16. And item 18, the last of our combined items, now comes before us. Mr. Gomo. And just a reminder to anyone who came in late, there are sign-up sheets for item 11 outside the auditorium and in front. Mr. Gomo.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, item 18. Resolved, the representative town meeting adopts the Town of Greenwich pre-disaster mitigation plan as part of a regional pre-disaster mitigation plan as recommended by the Board of Selectmen and in accordance with the Federal Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 18 has been moved and seconded. Bob Richardson, Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Mr. Moderator, the Health and Human Services Committee met jointly with the Town Services Committee to hear a presentation on this item by Mr. Gomo and by Chief Warzoa. The pre-disaster mitigation plan grows out of and is a requirement of the Federal Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000, which requires that all municipalities have a plan of this type in order to qualify for post-disaster relief. The idea is to push the planning responsibility for natural disasters down to the lowest level of government. Our plan was prepared mainly by Larry Bradley and Matt Steinberg, who are members of the Planning and Zoning staff, working in cooperation with the SWERPA staff, which received a FEMA grant to coordinate the development of plans by the 8 municipalities in Connecticut's southwest region. The purpose of the plan is to identify actions which may be taken in the short run to mitigate advanced potential hazards to life or property, taken in advance to limit those hazards, in the event of natural disasters such as hurricanes, flood, drought, etc. Threats from bioterrorism are not the subject of this type of plan. This plan includes a variety of actions to be considered and acted upon by the town, and it represents an excellent beginning. Mr. Gomo expects that the plan will be reviewed and approved at the federal level and will be massaged by us and refined over the next couple of years. The vote in our committee was 11 in favor, none against, none abstaining, and 1 absent, District 11.
Thank you. Robert Cavee, Chair of our Public Works Committee.
The Public Works Committee met on this item on Monday night, and it was presented by Town Administrator Ed Gomo. It's less of a plan and more of a big list, but if it satisfies the needs for our ability to apply for money post-disaster, then it's a plan. Our vote was 10-0. It was a very big list, incidentally. Our vote was 10-0-0 with Districts 2 and 4 absent.
Thank you. Mark Dawson, Chair of the Town Services Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the town meeting. As Mr. Richardson mentioned, we had a joint meeting with his committee as well as Town Services. Mr. Gomo and Chief Warzoa was present to go over the plan. The only thing I'll add to Mr. Richardson's remarks to our joint meeting is there was some discussion on whether or not we'll see this again when it's reviewed and updated on a regular basis. And the thought was it possibly would not. I would encourage Mr. Gomo and the Chief to bring this back to us when it does get updated. Our vote was 9-0-0 with Districts 2, 4, and 6 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 18. All right, that brings us to the end of the combined items. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Combined items 1, 3, 4, 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18, and proceed to poll your delegation. While we are voting, we will continue with the business of the meeting. The first of the separate items now comes before us. That's item number 5. Marcos Madrid, Commissioner, Public Works.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM, first of all, I just wish everyone a very happy holiday season. Number 5, resolved that the sum of $150,000 be and the same is hereby appropriated to be added to Public Works account number R317-59-600-24-099, known as Public Works Old Greenwich Railroad Station Rehabilitation.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 5 has been moved and seconded. Josh Brown with the report of our Finance Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, the Finance Committee last Monday night with 11 districts present and voting. District 9 was absent. We had Alan Manelli discussing this item with us. He walked through the process of securing the funding that was needed for the rehabilitation of the stations and what they found when they embarked on their reconstruction process, the substantial amount of rework that had to be done, and this money is needed in order to finish the project, in addition to the Old Greenwich, but also to do the roof at the Riverside Station. The money is coming from a state fund that is established. Monies are derived from revenues and services through the train stations and parking, and is deposited into this fund and can be used to upgrade and upkeep those stations. After this money is taken, there'll be a little bit over $600,000 is what we're told, and that they're currently planning additional rehabilitation projects for other stations. Our vote on this item was 10 in favor, 1 against, and none abstaining. One member felt that they had not taken good care of the commuters in that we're now into the winter season. There was no protection from the elements during their reconstruction project, and many of them have to fend for themselves with no protection, and this was a concern to that district. 10-1-0.
Thank you. Mr. Kavee with the Public Works Committee report.
Yes, we met on Monday night with Al Manelli presenting and Chief Warzoa and Marcos Madrid present. The job has to be finished. There's a little bit of doubt whether when we take money in this fashion, the state might not have backed us up on an overrun, but they did. And we were evidently willing to go forth spending town money if the state didn't back us up. There was some confusion whether the state would be capable of allocating the money for us in time. There was considerable discussion raised by Mary Young of District 6 regarding the need for heated shelter at the Old Greenwich Railroad Station during the winter months, considering that this project was delayed from November to probably March. The administration, town administration that was present, which included Fire Chief Daniel Warzoa, Commissioner Marcos Madrid, and Alan Manelli, effectively said that there was no way they could react to providing any shelter through a reasonable process in time for this to be done, and thus there will be no heated shelter for the commuters at Old Greenwich Station. Our vote was 10-0-0 with districts 2 and 4 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 5. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item number 5, and proceed to poll your delegation. We have remaining items 6, 11, and 17. At this time, I'd like to ask someone to collect the sign-up sheets for item 11. Mr. Curtis, can you do that? Thank you. If anyone else wants to sign up and hasn't already, there are some sheets I'll leave out in the front here. All right, that brings us to item 6. Chief Daniel Warzoa, the Greenwich Fire Department.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM and guests, resolved that the sum of $49,000 be, and the same is hereby appropriated to be added to the account number Z345-59560-23013, Coscop Fire Station renovation. The item is the same as it appears on your call.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 6 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Brown.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, the Finance Committee met last Monday evening with the 11 districts present and voting for this item. We had 2 districts show up late in our discussions. We had the Chief Warzoa and Mr. Manelli helping us understand this item. The $49,000 is broken down into $26,000 additional monies required to complete and provide for the women's dormitory area within the firehouse, and the second $23,000 to effectively replace the exhaust system. The union, as many of us know, had pressed on a number of issues as related to the redesign of the firehouse. Those redesigns required and ultimately led to the development and preparation of a separate area for women firefighters. That was explained to us to require an overall expenditure over $100,000 to effect. Most of the money was taken from the contingency fund or account to cover that. Remaining $26,000 could not be covered by contingency, and that is the balance that's being requested from us tonight. The second part was the exhaust system. There's apparently some new equipment that's being stored in the firehouse. Air testing, etc., has brought the need for additional exhaust capabilities to remove that smoke from when the engines are starting up and leaving the firehouse. And this $23,000 is to replace the existing system. We're told that the firehouse has been reoccupied except for the fire police, and they're awaiting the installation of this exhaust system in order to complete that transition. Our vote was in favor of this item. 9 districts in favor, 0 opposed, and 2 abstaining. We were without District 9, and Districts 4 and 11 showed up late in our discussions and felt that they should not vote without participating, being able to participate. 9-0-2 is our vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Kavee with the report of our Public Works Committee.
Public Works Committee considered this item as presented by Fire Chief Daniel Warzoa. The only thing that I can add to the previous discussion is that the female quarters will not probably be used immediately by any female, because there's only one female firefighter in the department, and she is stationed at the central fire station and probably will not take any assignments at the Coscop station. However, the quarters can be used by male firefighters if needed, and they are needed to be compliant with, I believe, state law. Our vote was 10-0-0, with Districts 2 and 4 absent.
Thank you. Mark Dawson with the Town Services Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen of the town meeting. Town Services Committee met last Tuesday night to discuss this item. Chief Warzoa was with us. Basically, some of the same comments Chairman Brown just spoke about. We did or would like to clarify a couple of things. One, the female dorm, the female is allowed or does have the opportunity to take overtime in any station, and the chief mentioned that there is a possibility that she would be occupying that dormitory during those overtime shifts. So it is possible that it can be used by her as of tonight if she was working a shift. Also, the other thing would be the new vehicles that were mentioned. The fire police vehicle is in place already. They were put that system into use last week, and the other two vehicles are the spare trucks that are in the station due to their exhaust. Our vote was 9-0-0 with districts 2, 4, and 6 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 6. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 6, and proceed to poll your delegation. I have the results of the vote on the combined items. Those were items 1, 3, 4, 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18. Those in favor, 184. Opposed, 0. Abstaining, 0. Those items have carried. That now brings us to item 11. May we have the resolution on that item? Denise Sabajo, our Conservation Director.
Mr. Moderator, RTM members, wish you all a happy holiday. Item number 11, resolved that the sum of $47,000 be, and the same is hereby appropriated to be added to the account number identified below, number A172-51440, consulting, $47,000.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 11 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees, beginning with Franklin Bloomer, the Land Use Committee report.
The Land Use Committee took up this item at our meeting last Monday evening. We had all 12 districts represented, and it was presented to us by Denise Sabajo. The appropriation is for a cull of the town's deer population by approximately 200 animals. The proposed cull is the outcome of a study into managing our deer population that was completed just this last October. That report is in the explanos, and many of you probably looked at it. The report states that the natural population of deer in this area, where natural predators are present, is, or probably was, back in colonial days, approximately 10 deer per square mile. The deer population in the backcountry, at least, is presently 12 times that number, or that's the estimate in the report. 120 deer per square mile. Lesser density in the mid-country, and deer extending on down even into District 5, my district. The overabundance of deer has negative consequences for the town. Number one, the high density of deer correlates with increased incidence of Lyme disease. Number two, the deer herd is estimated to consume something on the order of 15 tons of vegetation daily. The deer, this has a big effect on the biodiversity of our town. They devour the ground cover and shrubs that comprise the natural understory of our woods. They also devour tree seedlings that make up new growth for the existing canopy, at least of those trees that they like. This in turn impacts birds and smaller animals because they lose their food and their homes. The third major consequence is the large number of road accidents involving deer. The cull is the first step in reducing the deer population to approximately 26 deer per acre within a 3 to 5 year period. Once the herd is down to an acceptable size, it is expected that the size of the herd can be managed by hunting and birth control. As I said, the cull is designed to remove 200 animals. This will be done at 3 sites in town, all of which are town-owned properties. It will be done by baiting, putting out bait at these sites. The deer will be shot from a tree stand so that the trajectory will be into the ground, believed to be quite a safe way to do it. Night vision equipment and suppressed firearms will be used to keep down the visibility of the operation. The deer carcasses will be removed and they'll be dressed, and the carcasses will be donated to a food bank for serving the needy. The cull will be performed by a nationally known specialist in urban deer management. The vote was 9 in favor, 2 opposed, with 1 abstention. As I say, all of our districts were present at this vote. The delegate for District 1 was opposed to killing deer. The delegate from District 12 felt that the existing hunting regimen, which is with bow hunting, can address the overpopulation. The abstaining district, which was District 11, needed more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh Brown with the report of our Finance Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, fellow members, and guests. The Finance Committee last Monday night, we also had Denise Savageau, the Executive Director, helping us to understand this item. To add to the previous report, we did inquire about the insurance coverage that the vendor has. They do carry their own liability insurance for purpose. We also inquired about the town's plan. There are elements of the town's insurance program that would also cover should unforeseen events occur. But there was no impact on rates, et cetera, was what was explained to us. Also, that this operation requires a special DEP license or permit in order to do this. It's not a open hunting, effectively. It's a specific purpose permit. And again, the goal is to reduce the herds and provide some birth control measures to measure and evaluate whether that can have a sustaining effect on keeping the deer population down. So we did have discussion about how that process works of applying such. Our committee felt very concerned that there needs to be a very coordinated and effective education program to ensure that the public's aware of what is going on, when it's going on, and certainly that the police is providing reasonable and appropriate protection during those periods where the cull is going on. And that certainly parks are going to be closed during that time. Ms. Savageau indicated that they would be, but we suggested that additional measures be taken to ensure that, again, all the precautions that can be taken are being taken. Our vote on this item was 9 in favor, 1 opposed, and 1 abstaining, with District 9 absent. The 1 opposed felt that there are liability issues and other problems, other animals in town that should receive certain consideration, namely geese. And the other was just a difficult to vote either for or against it due to the culling process. 9-1-1 in favor of the item.
Thank you. Karen Sadek-Khan with the report of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
After the Parks and Rec Committee finished receiving all the wonderful gifts of pavilions, plants, and money, we decided to take up item 11 as the action of this item will be taking place on the town's parks land. Denise Savageau, Conservation Director, attended our meeting, and much of the information that Mr. Bloomer shared with you, we also reviewed. Specifically, the overpopulation of deer, how has it impacted the incidence of Lyme tick disease, vehicle accidents, and the ecology of many animals and plants in Greenwich. How the deer population is really overpopulated. In backcountry, where you would expect 10 to 20 deer per square mile, there are as many as 120. There are 85 in mid-country and pockets of the south of the Post Road. The goal of the program, as Mr. Bloomer mentioned, would be to reduce the herd to 26 per square mile in a 3 to 5 year period of time. Denise Savageau further explained the proposal that three town properties, Pomerantz, Pine Needham, Babcock, and the Griff Harris Golf Course would be the sites of the culling, which would be conducted by luring white-tailed deer to the site and using sharpshooting to kill them. White Buffalo, Inc., a nonprofit wildlife management organization, will conduct the cull. They will work with the Parks and Rec Department and the Police Department to assure the issues of safety, humane treatment, and efficiency. The deer will be removed and taken to soup kitchens. After the culling process is accomplished, the goal is to have a study on fertility control at the Pomerantz Pine Needham, so that there will be a maintenance program to continue the reduction of numbers of deer. It is planned right now, from what we understood, that the first culling will be done in February at night, taking about a week at the Pomerantz Pine Needham property. This is outside of the hunting season. A sharpshooting protocol from White Buffalo was distributed, It gives specific details of what procedures will be followed during the kill. Concerns and questions followed our discussion. Some of the concerns. To begin, there was a concern about Greenwich being the first municipality in Connecticut to get this special permit or new permit from the DEP. The credibility of White Buffalo Inc. was questioned. They can be looked at on the internet, which I will discuss later as an individual when I speak. The issue of whether or not it is humane to lure the deer for killing and then use night scopes and suppressors for shooting them. The issue of safety was brought up. Those concerns were satisfied in the conversation. Realistically, will the town be able to maintain the reduced herd numbers through a birth control program or by further promoting hunting? The cost of the program was questioned. It's $92 for the principal sharpshooter and $62 for his assistant per hour. And the cost of each deer killed is $80. With the goal of 200 deer, this is $16,000 alone that will be paid for the deer that are culled. Additional costs would include setup, removal of deer, etc. The kill zones in the parks. To some, it seemed like these are natural habitats for deer. Will there still be a lot of complaints and issues of excessive numbers of deer on private properties? Lastly, the issue has come before us only 6 weeks before the program is slated to begin in February. Should there be more time for investigation? Our vote, 6-4-1, District 8 absent. Our vote reflects the mixed reactions of the committee to the proposal. Those who voted against had the questions that I just suggested to you. One person District 4, abstained. She felt there were too many fallacies in the proposal. She didn't like the expense. She thought it should be compared to other organizations, what they might cost to do culling, and she was concerned about the reliability of using a .22 to shoot deer in the dark at night. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, before I get into discussion on this item, I will report the vote on items 5 and 6. Item 5 was the appropriation of $150,000 for the rehabilitation of the old Greenwich Railroad Station. Those in favor, 181. Opposed, 0. Abstaining, 0. That item has carried. The vote on item 6, which was the appropriation of $49,000 with respect to the renovation of the Coscob Fire Station. Those in favor, 177. Opposed, 3. Abstaining, 1. That item has carried. All right, we will now get into discussion on item 11. Bob Tuthill, District 3. Mr. Tuthill, would you come forward, please?
Mr. Moderator, I move that discussion on this item only be limited to 3 minutes per motion, with the exception of the principal, proponent, and opponent to be designated by the moderator be given 10 minutes each. Thank you.
Is there a second? All right, it has been moved and seconded to limit debate on item 11 to 3 minutes per speaker per motion, with the exception that the principal proponent and the principal opponent, the latter to be determined at the discretion of the moderator, shall be allowed 10 minutes to debate. Mr. Boutel, please state your point of order. Okay. The motion to limit debate is not debatable, and it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. I will call for a voice vote on this motion to limit debate. So if you are in favor of limiting speakers, and I will just say that the results of the sign-up have come up with approximately 25 names of interested speakers. Right? So if you are in favor of limiting the speakers to 3 minutes, then you should vote in favor of this. Mr. Dawson, for what purpose do you rise?
Moderator, we have a lot of visitors. Please restate the ground rules for who can vote on the voice vote, please.
Okay. So I will call for a voice vote. I just want to make it clear, if you want to limit debate to 3 minutes per speaker, with the exceptions as I noted, you should vote in favor of this. if you want to allow, in the absence of a motion to limit debate, Robert's Rules limits speakers to 10 minutes. Because of our arrangement here, I just want to remind everyone, I think it's obvious, that only RTM members may vote when I call for a voice vote. All right. All those in favor of Mr. Tuthill's motion to limit debate on item 11, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. Denise Savageau, Conservation Director. And you will have up to 10 minutes. Doesn't mean you have to use it.
Good evening. I hope I won't take 10 minutes. I just want to go over a few items that have come up in terms of issues. I spent a lot of time at the 3 committees, and I know you've brought that information back to your districts as well. Just wanted to go over a couple of things. The town has been looking at the deer issue for over 4 years, and actually before that. There was already studies going on with the Conservation Commission when I took this job 7 years ago. What came out of the report that the Commission just finalized in October was the need to immediately act in terms of herd reduction. That herd reduction calls for 2 phases, basically immediate reduction and a leadership by the town to take action specifically on the properties we manage, and then to work on private properties in terms of getting private property owners to work on herd reduction as well. We've actually been working on that simultaneously with doing our report and promoting hunting on private properties. One of the things that the study has come out with, and one of the things I've heard that's a little controversial, people say, well, the town doesn't have a plan. The Conservation Commission came out with a detailed report that outlined a plan. One of the things we are in the process of finalizing with some of those details is when we submit the permit request to DEP, we have to submit it with a plan. So there is a plan in the process, and just putting details, and I think any of you who read the Conservation Commission report, you saw the outline and the recommendations that will form the basis of the plan. Just a clarification, again, where there was, of the 47,000, 16,000 is allotted for processing of meat. And interestingly enough, we have been contacted by the hunting community to contribute to their processing of meat. So to suggest that hunting is going to be free is incorrect. We have been approached not only this year but in previous years for processing of meat. Just quickly, in terms of working, this decision was not made by the Conservation Commission. This committee was made by staff. Once the Conservation Commission finished its report, the report was given to the first selectman, and meeting with the first selectman, the chief of police, the director of Parks and Recreation, and the town administrator with myself. We looked at several different proposals, including hunting on town property. So that's kind of where we went. We looked at this and said that this looks like it's the most efficient and most humane way to go. There are a couple of questions I know of people who are saying, well, why should we be looking at deer management at all? There's a host of reasons, but in particular the ecology of the area. But I want you to think about the problems we're having with deer vehicular accident and a few other things. It's not humane for deer to be being hit by cars because there's so many of them. We're channeling them with our deer fence into the streets. We have deer being caught in deer fencing because people are trying to protect their properties that our animal control officer has to then take out because the deer get entangled. So there's a host of things that we looked at. What we wanted to do was put in the safest and most humane program for our town properties. And one last point that we looked at, been working very closely with the Audubon. I'm on the Audubon Science Committee, and most of you know they're hunting on property. Last year it averaged a little bit over 10 hours per deer to harvest the deer. This year the average is about 12.7 hours per deer. If we were going to have hunting on our town properties, and let's say we're just going to take 30 deer out, and we could take the low end, the 10 hours per deer, that means that we would have to have our parks open to take out 30 deer, 300 hours of hunting time allowed on the, that's a lot of parks being open for a long time to use hunting, as a way to do that. So one of the things we looked at, and some of the concerns of those of us in terms of staff were saying, how would we ever manage this on town property? And it's one of the reasons we thought the most efficient way to cull on our own properties was to use the sharpshoot. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Karen Sadekhan to be followed by Stephanie Palmino.
Good evening. Just a couple of points. In talking to people since this plan has become discussed in the last few days, I think there's still a certain amount of reaction, that there's a certain level of violence that's attached to luring the animals with bait and then shooting them at night when they're obviously most going to be mostly surprised by it. I'm wondering if this is the standard that Greenwich really wants to set with how we approach the problem. Moreover, doing it in the Pomerantz Pine Edom as the first location seems to me to be a parkland area that's thought of as passive and inviting to all of us. I don't know how inviting it will be to any deer that are left once they've had the experience of their fellow herd being culled in that environment. There still will be the problem for homeowners. I'm not convinced that culling them out of the parkland will solve the problem that exists so largely on private property in Greenwich. Deer don't move miles and miles away. They stay within a couple of miles of the region where they are living, so to speak. Lastly, it's not a major issue, but if you go on the internet and you look up White Buffalo Inc., you can dig up a little dirt. They've had a little problem in Akron, Ohio. The Akron Journal reports that there's been a dispute that they're involved in with several agencies, one being Shark, which is an animal rights group called Showing Animals Respect and Kindness. Apparently there was an attempt to actually videotape how the process takes place. It turned out to be a disaster between the park people and Shark and White Buffalo. And the short and long of it was that there's an accusation that actually not all the deer were killed instantly, and they were dragged away, some while they were still alive, with plastic bags over their heads, supposedly to cover up blood. I don't know if all that's true, but I find it alarming. As chairman of the RTM Parks and Rec Committee, if this is passed, I hope I will be invited to go to the Pine Edom to see how this is done.
Stephanie Palmino to be followed by Tom Van Leeuwen.
Hi. I'm here with a very heavy heart. I've been a healthcare provider for about 35 years, and I never thought I'd be standing in front of a group of people in favor of culling a herd. It breaks my heart to think of the process involved in doing this, but as a healthcare provider, I'm very keenly aware of the problems associated with Lyme disease. I sit on a Lyme disease task force, and I can't think of another way to resolve this problem. I would hope that it would be a humane process. I hate the idea of baiting an animal and bringing it in to be killed, but I think of the human side of this, and I see the children and the adults and the people who are affected by Lyme disease, which is a very insidious illness and which creates many problems that can last many, many years. It affects our children's learning, it affects people's way of life, it affects their very quality of life. So with a very heavy heart, I find I have to weigh in on the side of being in favor of culling a herd.
Thank you. Now, I'd ask when I call the name of the following speaker that that person come down. We have chairs up front so that we don't have to have dead time as individuals walk up and down. Tom Van Leeuwen to be followed by Debbie Siciliano, and if you had some children you wanted to speak, I'll take the group after Mr. Van Leeuwen. Mr. Van Leeuwen?
Thank you. 5 years ago, I couldn't imagine myself in the position I'm in tonight. A year ago, I took up bow hunting for deer out of frustration with the population in my backyard. I stand before you tonight opposed to this $47,000 expenditure. I think it is an absurd waste of money. I think there are much better ways of culling the deer herd in Greenwich. I think we can do much more to encourage bow hunting in Greenwich. We can have a town cooler where people can deposit deer, not just the GSLA facility. We can lobby the state to open up hunting on Sundays. Right now, Connecticut is only one of about 8 or 9 states in this country that does not permit hunting on Sunday. There are a lot of people who commute who also hunt, but are limited in their hunting to just Saturday. And if the weather's rotten on Saturday, you don't go out and hunt because the deer aren't out and moving. So, from what I've seen, there are a lot of things that Greenwich can do to encourage hunting. One thing I'd also like to do is see the town encourage in zones 11 and 12 in the state that hunters can take more than 2 bucks in the fall season and 1 buck in January. This year when I've been out, I've seen more bucks than does, and I haven't been able to shoot them when they've been sitting out in front of me for 45 minutes at a time. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Siciliano, and your name?
Amanda. When I was in elementary school, I took a field trip to the Audubon Nature Center. As I was leaving, I found a tick crawling on me. Unfortunately, I found it and got it off before it bit me. Many others, including my brother, have not been so lucky. They were bitten and became very ill. There are far too many ticks in our area causing diseases. It is easy for children to get bitten. I play soccer on the town's fields and am grateful for the warning signs at the edge of the field indicating tick zones. However, many times when the ball goes into these tall grassy areas, I'm reluctant to go or let any of my teammates go to get the ball as we are at risk for a tick bite. On behalf of many of my friends sick with Lyme who are unable to come tonight, we need the town of Greenwich to take action to reduce the ticks, and this means reducing the deer. Thank you for your consideration on the deer management proposal tonight.
Thank you. Debbie Siciliano to be followed by Jeff Stempian.
Thank you. My name is Debbie Siciliano, and I'm here tonight as a very concerned citizen and parent. My family moved to Greenwich, Connecticut from London 7 years ago, and only 4 months after moving here, my 7-year-old son received a tick bite and a very serious case of Lyme disease. I reached out to our Department of Health in a state of fear for the residents in this town. I asked, do the residents know how easy it is to contract Lyme disease and how difficult it can be to cure? Do the residents know that their children are in the highest risk category for contracting a tick-borne illness because they play where the ticks live? Do the residents understand that the environment has changed dramatically from when they were children and that our families are in harm's way due to the epidemic in our backyards? Today, I believe a large majority of our residents are aware of Lyme disease and other tick-borne illness. In fact, Greenwich Hospital conducted a town-wide survey in October of 2003, and the #1 health issue on the minds of our residents came back as Lyme disease. Although our residents do have this education about preventing this disease, is this good enough to stop the residents from contracting it? I don't think it is, and I believe that's because the ticks are too plentiful to avoid a tick bite. As both Dave Anderson and Kirby Stafford, who are scientists for the Connecticut Department of Agricultural Station, they have made this quote, and it is that there is a direct correlation between the number of deer and the number of deer tick. The deer numbers are out of control, and therefore the tick numbers are out of control. On behalf of many more children who had wanted to come tonight, but because of the late hour they couldn't, I ask you to take immediate action to reduce the deer herd and thereby reduce the tick numbers. Our town cannot afford to have one more child robbed of their childhood due to this insidious disease. Tonight, the RTM gets to choose between A, the reduction of the deer herd, thereby choosing better health for the residents, better health for the deer herd in general, better health for other wildlife, and safer traffic. Or you get to choose voting against this, and then you might have the continuation of the overpopulated state of the deer and all the hazards that come with that. I wish to personally thank Elizabeth Hirsch and the Conservation Commission for the in-depth study of this situation and their important recommendations, and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Jeff Stempian to be followed by Elizabeth Hirsch.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM, good evening. My name is Jeff Stempian. I'm a town resident here. I've been here for 45 years, and I'm a town employee of 21. I stand before you tonight with my reputation behind me as my witness, a reputation of honesty, one of honor, and one of integrity, one that I have proven over the past 21 years. As an active resident of Greenwich, I'm deeply involved in numerous civic activities, including youth sports, and I do care about our town and how my tax dollar and yours are spent. Excuse me. I speak to you tonight as a resident, as a taxpayer, and as one with firsthand knowledge of the topic in discussion, the Greenwich white-tailed deer. I was shocked when I recently viewed the local newspaper and read of the proposed budget cuts in such essential areas as special education and sports activities at our schools, because our children are our future. I was shocked when I read of the cost of the rebuilding of Nathaniel Witherell, the lack of flu shots for our elderly, because they, right now, are our present. I find no logic in the request for spending $47,000 on deer management when there are so many other items that are more worthy of this money. I applaud our first selectman and our conservation director, who have realized that we have a deer problem and their attempts to address it. I, however, strongly disagree with this funding request, this plan that is destined for failure from the start and a waste of the taxpayers' money. This funding request is a non-essential item, one that does not and cannot address the entire town of Greenwich, just a very small percentage of it by area alone. To remove 100 or even 200 deer from 3 or even 4 specific locations in town, these areas that represent less than 5% of the town property, is not going to address the size of the deer herd throughout. How can it? It's a logical question. Greenwich has already spent $60,000 on a deer study that proved what we already knew. That is that the Greenwich white-tailed deer has a very small homing range compared to other areas in New England, an ample food supply, even in the coldest of winters, and very few natural predators. You can focus your objection on specific locations, but this will not affect all the areas of town. You should realize that the white-tailed deer is a very hardy animal. It's been around a lot longer than most of us.
30 seconds.
The state of Connecticut DEP harvest data for 2003 suggests that almost 1,000 deer were killed in town. That's through expanded seasons, expanded harvest tag, and legalization of bait. We ought to think twice before we fire guns in town parks for the sake of public safety and for insurance. Name me an insurance company that will make a payment on a potential $1 million claim for a gun that was fired under an intentional act, one that was pre-planned, pre-organized, and carried out with the sanctioning of town government, whether it be the town or its agents. I urge you to think hardly about this and vote with your heart for what is right for the entire town of Greenwich, not just a small percentage of its property. I thank you for your time.
Elizabeth Hirsch, to be followed by Bob Orabona.
Mr. Moderator and members of the RTM, before you cast your vote this evening, I want to add just a couple of comments. In the year 2000, Lolly Prince appointed me to the Deer Management Subcommittee. Since then, I have been identified with this issue. Lots of folks have called me, and I am here to report that 9 out of 10 of these calls have been strongly supportive of reducing our deer herd. That's 90%. They see the overpopulation of deer in Greenwich as a serious health, biodiversity, and safety problem. But please, don't take my word for it. As part of the 3-year deer study sponsored by the Conservation Commission, a survey sampling of over 1,000 Greenwich households was conducted. Howard Kilpatrick, PhD, of the UConn campus, he's the researcher who headed the study, evaluated the findings. He used this as part of his doctoral dissertation in wildlife management and therefore followed the standard research protocols. 79% of Greenwich households support the reduction of the deer population. 74% support the use of deadly force. There is no denying what your constituents want. There are a number of parents here in the audience this evening. We've heard from some of them. They strongly support the cull. Some are from the Lyme Disease Task Force. Children do all sorts of activities on these town-owned lands. Youth organizations use them widely. The kids are particularly vulnerable. Now we have the chance to reduce the threat to our kids who least understand the symptoms of the bacterial, cardiovascular, and neurological disease. The price tag. This $47,000 should be thought of as being at least partly offset by the funds raised privately for the study. The PhD study is the good science on which the recommendation is made. 3 years ago, the $60,000 price tag seemed pricey. So instead of coming to the town, we created a public-private partnership. I personally raised $37,000 for this deer study, which made me somewhat unpopular at dinner parties. But I think that it represents a respectable percentage of the total cost that has been paid out of the town coffers.
30 seconds.
The cull will take place in the middle of the night. The bow hunters will not be able to hunt during the night. It is impossible to match the bow hunters with this program. And hunting has not been the most effective tool. We've heard that it takes about 12.8 hours to kill a deer on the Audubon property. If we could close the parks during the day, we would have to close them for 6 hours a day for 50 days to complete the cull. Incidentally, the cull will make the herd healthier and therefore better sport. Thank you.
Mr. Orabona, to be followed by Diane Blanchard.
Hi, I'm Bob Orabona from Friends of Animals Darien, Connecticut, and I'm reading this study that cost you $60,000 and took 4 years to make. And on page 5 in the last paragraph, it states, our local deer density surpasses even that known for some fully protected natural parks. Why? Why is it that areas with no hunting have less deer density than Greenwich? And so why recommend hunting and culling as a way to reduce deer population? These studies, this hunting in Connecticut has been sponsored by the DEP, which has manipulated the deer herd size to promote hunting, to make it easy to kill a deer. And now you're looking for them to provide a solution. And you can see by their own study, there's questions as whether hunting will ever be effective in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane Blanchard, to be followed by, is it John Michelotti?
Thank you for this opportunity, members of the RTM. In 1988, my husband and I purchased a home in Greenwich to raise a family. We chose this area because of its bucolic beauty, fine schools, and proximity to work. During those early years, we enjoyed the natural setting of our home. Our family enjoyed hiking through the woods, playing baseball, and soccer in our backyard and on town fields. Today, my children still enjoy the outdoors and their love of sports, but the innocence of that play has been lost for my family. Since we lived in Greenwich, my 3 children and I have all contracted Lyme disease. We suffered with unknown malaise for years before it was finally recognized in a late stage. 2 of my 3 children appear well today after 6 years of battling this disease. However, 1 does not. After seemingly overcoming this scourge, my child was rebitten and this time co-infected with a second tick-borne illness. The result was devastating to watch as it completely stole the life from my child, too tired and sick to play sports, too fatigued to attend class, too disorganized to maintain good grades, too confused to remain focused. Our first tick bite occurred in the late 80s, and the second in 2003. What has changed between then and now? The prevalence of deer and ticks, and the ticks that they harbor. Lyme disease and deer have greatly multiplied in our woods and yards. They are no longer a simple nuisance that eat our flowers and shrubs. They are the carriers of the disease that afflicts our families, our friends, and our neighbors. The animals most responsible for tick-borne illness are the mice and deer. The mice are responsible for spreading the disease as they are the reservoirs for infection, but the deer are responsible for the increasing numbers of ticks as the adult female completes its final feeding from a preferred large mammal. The town of Greenwich has seen a steady increase in the number of infected ticks. In 2000, 31% of ticks were infected. As of 2003, that number has risen to 42%. Our lab only tests for the presence of Lyme disease, therefore we do not know what other infections these ticks might harbor. While the concept of destroying animals is not pleasant, the practice of deer culling has been successfully implemented in many other communities, including Princeton, New Jersey, Fairfax County, Virginia, Upper St. Clair Municipality near Philadelphia, and many other areas.
30 seconds.
Some people feel that it is inhumane to kill deer, but what is truly unacceptable and inhumane is standing idly by while watching deer slowly starve to death, or most importantly, watching countless children lose the innocence of their childhood through illness. Greenwich is a community in crisis. We have the power tonight to approve a measure that can help to eradicate the suffering of an overpopulated deer population and protect our children in the process. I ask you, please, make the decision for the children of Greenwich to aggressively reduce the deer herd by sharpshooting and thereby improve conditions to safeguard our children's health.
Thank you. John Michelotti, to be followed by Sharon D'Annunzio.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Michelotti. I'm Secretary and Director of GSLA. Our President, Bob Delaney, could not be here tonight. He sends his regrets. A district chairman asked, as a representative of GSLA, if we could address two issues. Just a short background for those of you who don't know Greenwich Sportsmen and Landowners Association. We were founded in 1991. We're 13 years old. We have been involved in this issue, practically the only organization involved in this issue from day one. We organize and manage local bow hunters. We've made and serviced relationships with landowners who want to reduce the deer herd on their properties. We found volunteer local businesses and petitioned the DEPs to set up deer check stations at those businesses. We purchased and located a cooler to make it easier for hunters to take deer. We found and negotiated with butchers to process the venison. We raised the money to pay for the processing. We developed a relationship with the Fairfield County Food Bank and their client soup kitchens. We've been the largest contributor of venison in Connecticut for Hunters for the Hungry for the last 4 years. We were selected by the National Audubon to reduce the deer population on their Greenwich sanctuary. We've been the only organized effort to address this issue for 12 years. To date, this season, our members, only 24, have taken well over 100 deer and given 2,800 pounds of venison to the food bank. We believe we've earned the right to speak tonight and give you our opinion. I don't think there's an issue about whether to cull the deer herd. I think the issue is how. The first question I was asked to speak about is insurance. Connecticut General Statute 52-557G, quote, landowners who allow without fee the recreational use of their property are protected from liability by Connecticut law. This was originally written for equestrian, but it applies to hunting, it applies to fishing, it applies to all recreational activities. Therefore, the town, to allow hunting on their properties, is protected by the state. The second question I was asked, could GSLA handle this job? Let's define what the job is first.
30 seconds.
The town commissioned a $60,000 report. This report says there's 100 to 120 deer per square mile. Well, the three properties we're talking about are less than a square mile, which means less than 100 deer live on these. So how they're going to take 200 deer off a place that only has 100 deer, and if they eliminate every deer that's 100 deer, their goal is to only take 75%. That comes out to $625 per deer. Doesn't make sense to us. It seems very extravagant. We believe this is a knee-jerk reaction, just so the town can say, we've done something.
Sharon D'Annunzio, to be followed by Daniel Hammer.
Hi, my name is Sharon D'Annunzio. I'm another concerned resident of Greenwich, and I'm here tonight to continue to highlight the widespread problem of Lyme disease in our town. Debbie Siciliano already reported on the direct correlation of Lyme disease in the deer population. What everyone should also realize is that Connecticut has the highest per capita rate of Lyme disease of any state, and Fairfield County has a higher per capita rate than Connecticut. So Greenwich, Connecticut is a hotspot for Lyme disease. I live in mid-country Greenwich in a neighborhood cul-de-sac with about 14 homes. In my neighborhood, all but 3 families have had someone in the family who has contracted Lyme disease. My son, who is now age 14, first contracted Lyme disease at age 5 and was re-diagnosed at age 9. He missed almost half of his 5th grade and another half of his 7th grade. He has suffered from chronic fatigue, severe headaches, joint pain, insomnia, vomiting, and encephalitis, which is brain swelling. 2 years ago, he spent 5 months on intravenous antibiotics. Today, he remains somewhat well, but he requires a combination of antibiotics to stay well. I contracted Lyme disease 4 years ago, and I've spent about 3 of the past 4 years on combinations of antibiotics. At the present, my health is excellent, but I cannot remain well without them. Lyme disease can be a chronic and debilitating illness. For children, it may be life-altering and radically impact their physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development. Our children should have the opportunity to play outdoors without the risk of contracting Lyme disease. Please support the Funds for Deer Management. That is not to say that bow hunting cannot be an alternative that is used at the same time as this deer culling technique with sharpshooting. I have hired personally someone from the GLSA in my backyard for the past 3 seasons, and I know several of my neighbors have done likewise. That can be a somewhat successful use of culling deer. However, it is nowhere near as effective as the sharpshooting. We have had 3 deer in my property in 3 years killed. That will not do it. So please, again, support item 11. Thank you.
Daniel Hammer, to be followed by Linda Houston.
Hello, I'm with the Friends of Animals. We believe that there are alternatives to cull and hunting that are ethical and biologically sound alternatives that seek to preserve the ecological integrity and habitat and the constituent species of that habitat. The report starts out by saying the real problem is the overabundance of deer, but the report comes up with the idea that deer need to be eliminated and that, a management technique, either the reduction of the herd by relocation, birth control, or hunting is one of the choices, and they say that hunting is the only alternative. But these seek to avoid the issue in the report that says nothing about conflicting things about deer auto collisions and reports that have shown that hunting actually increases deer auto collisions during the months when hunting is taking place. For instance, in Wilton, they doubled the amount of hunting in the last year and tripled the amount of deer auto collisions. As for public health, Lyme disease is a serious epidemic that needs to be concerned, but also should be concerned is the disruption of the ecology of deer herds, which would bring in, as was said earlier, deer are limited in their range, but once you start eliminating individuals, more individuals will come in and will distribute more the ticks. Friends of Animals has determined that hunting is ecologically disruptive and that suspicious wildlife science presents a justification for hunting under the pretext of biological mayhem. Friends of Animals considers hunting and culling to be socially disreputable and diverts society's search for real solutions to serious problems. Thank you.
Linda Houston, to be followed by Dr. Carl Carlson.
Hi, my name is Linda Houston. My family and I moved to Greenwich a little under 4 years ago. My son was 11 years old when he contracted Lyme disease. I didn't know what it was. He came home from school one day with severe head pain. We brought him from doctor to doctor trying to figure out what he had, and we finally learned that he had Lyme disease. My son was home from school for almost all of his 6th grade. We brought him from doctor to doctor, from medicine to medicine. Someone was concerned about the cost of deer hunting and this program, and I will tell you the cost of curing someone of Lyme disease is atrocious, and insurance companies don't back us. After a month of my son being on IV, the insurance stopped. I asked the medical company what most families do in this case, and they said they just stop the medicine for their children, or in some cases the families go bankrupt. The cost of curing Lyme disease can be devastating and bankrupt families. I ask you to look on the one hand at a herd of deer and how cute and graceful they are, and on the other hand look at your families and your loved ones and your close friends, and I ask you which one would you want to protect more? I think it would be the family, your friends, and loved ones. And I ask you to support this program and reduce the deer herd. And let's not rob our children of their childhood anymore. My son lost a year. He couldn't go to school. He couldn't play. He was in pain. We watched him being tortured from the inside out, and we couldn't do anything to help him or stop his pain. After about 4 months, the pain started subsiding, but he's still not back to normal. And I bring him to physical therapy twice a week now, after more than 14 months of him coming down with neurological symptoms. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Carlson, to be followed by Susan Mara.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members of the RTM, my remarks tonight are basically going to be personal on this. Through the years, I've become more sympathetic than ever to the animals that live around Greenwich. So many of them who wander into District 1 do wander into my little forest around Lenox and Washington. I think it's a very poor thing to massacre these things. And I would ask you, consider your humanity on this. As far as the people who get deer ticks, you really need to destroy the whole herd to have much effect on this, which is not the question. I'd just like to leave you tonight with a few remarks on a similar theme made by the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge in his Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Just a few lines. He prayeth well who loveth well, both man and bird and beast. He prayeth best who loveth best, all things both great and small. For the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all.
Thank you. Susan Mara, to be followed by Christine Edwards.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mara, and I practice medicine here in Southern Connecticut with Dr. Ziad Sabovic, and about 90% of our practice is comprised of Lyme disease patients. I'm familiar with Linda Houston's son's problems. I'm familiar with Diane Blanchard's son's problems and Debbie Siciliano's child's problems. What we see is absolutely an epidemic in this community and in this state. And I would venture to guess that every single one of you in this room either knows somebody or has themselves experienced Lyme disease. It's a devastating disease. And not only that, but there are 4 co-infections which are transmitted by ticks. And ticks, one of the major carriers of ticks, is the white-tailed deer. Now understand, I have a great respect for the natural world, and I in no way want to harm the natural world. but the natural world is harming us very severely. Children are losing years off their life. They're becoming crippled. They can't think. They can't see. They can't hear. They can't experience life. So I ask you to think about what are the consequences of ending the lives of several deer as opposed to maintaining the lives of all the many children in Greenwich whose potential is beyond belief and who will contribute to the world when they grow up, hopefully in ways that we cannot even imagine. So please, let's vote in favor of this for the children.
Thank you. Christine Edwards to be followed by Dr. Sabarik.
Thank you. I am someone who's had Lyme disease. My husband's had it twice. My child's had it. I remember having removed a deer tick and bringing him to camp and said, "I'm sorry I'm late. We had to take a deer tick off." And I had one little boy said, "Oh, I had 10 taken off the other day." I'm very sensitive to the fact that they were deer tick. But I'm also acutely aware that the deer tick are not just carried on the white-tailed deer, that you have over 1,000 mice per acre in our town, and our mice are in our house. And I just spoke with somebody today who got deer tick in bed, and certainly there were no white-tailed deer there. And so you have little animals going all over the place that we can't control as well. Put those sticky traps down and count those ticks. But we do have certain other aspects of people who things that carry the deer tick, which are also the birds in the nymph stage. I think we're really focusing on deer and not tick mediation. And one of the principal ways to get rid of ticks, and I really want people to think about this, is through guinea hens, which eat deer tick. Now, on the front page of one paper a few weeks ago in Greenwich Time, someone was complaining about the noise of the guinea hens, but I really submit to you, I don't mind the thought of having a few in my backyard if they could clear up some tick problem. And maybe we should think of some predators who will take care of that, not just spending this amount of money on culling the deer herd, which is not going to really satisfactory at this amount of money take care of the problem just in this year. So I really think we have to look beyond just removing the deer. What are we going to do next? Remove the birds who are carrying the nymph, remove the mice, remove the raccoons, remove all the small animals who will also be carriers and do carry the deer tick, including my dog, who has dogs with ticks that come into the house. And those aren't necessarily animals that go anywhere near where the deer have been, depending on how you're walking the dog, if it's only exposed to downtown streets. So even the downtown cement areas where no deer may be, you're having mice, you're having birds, and they're dropping ticks as well. So that really has to be looked at. The issue of spending $47,000 when we have a great majority of the deer inhabiting north of the Parkway in private homes, I would suggest that in the same way that somebody's paying for their landscaping, paying for their leaves being gathered up, that they take responsibility as well for paying that $80 to $100 for the deer to be taken care of in their own property, and not me pay for that as a town. I'd rather have the guinea hens be given out freely to all those homes, and maybe they can take care of part of that deer population dropping ticks and the bird population dropping ticks, and the mice running through our houses dropping ticks. So I really think that from a point of view of us paying for this, I'd rather use that $47,000 toward research on why the spirochete is having this kind of central nervous system damage, because certainly I've had Lyme, and we've had Lyme in the family, with not this devastating impact. So what is it that will cause some people to have such a severe reaction to the deer tick and other people not to?
Thank you.
I'd rather see the money spent in that way. Thank you.
Yes, Doctor, I'm going to blame your handwriting for maybe not doing justice to your name. And Natalie Yarnstedt on deck.
Yes, hello. My name is Ziad Sabovic. I'm family physician. And I would like to share with you just a few comments about Lyme. During my education, I got information about Lyme very little. And moving here in Connecticut, it became reality for me because people are coming in the practice 12 years old with no memory. I haven't heard I haven't read in the book, nor nobody taught me about it. We're in the best age, no memory or joint pain, and I ask, please, can you sit down on the exam table? And they were moving like 88 years old. So that inspired me to see what is going on. And most of these patients end up that they are having Lyme or co-infection. And I was able to compare this situation because I had opportunity to be in other parts of the world, in India, in Africa, in a lot of different countries. And I never see in whole world situation like this one. In the most developed part of the world, people are in the midst of pain and suffering. From the medical point of view, financial point of view, I'm amazed. And I want to just share with you, I don't know, I'm not on either side. I want to just mention to you this tragedy. What is solution? 200 years, 5,000 years, I don't know. But at least to start, because in 20 years we will have handicapped people walking around, that they can be rocket scientists. So I want to thank you, and I hope that will bring a little bit awareness. Thank you very much.
Natalie Yarnstedt to be followed by Dana McCavity.
I would like to read to you a statement made by Mr. DeNicola of White Buffalo Incorporated. Quote, "We have the best available equipment with numerous hours of hands-on use to ensure precise shot placement. This results in safe use of equipment and humane treatment of target animals." Here's another quote from Mr. DeNicola. "We live in a sanitized world, so that's what we try to bring to this operation. You don't hear gunshots, you don't see the bloody carcasses, but in the end, the deer are gone. The deer are just gone, as if this brutality is justified merely by concealing it from us. Everything is sanitized. Terms like remote euthanasia, predation culling, harvesting, and taking are used to mask the word killing. Anyone who condones the massacre should be willing to witness it. Only then convince us that the deer are treated humanely. Last year, Philadelphia's Fairmount Park deer kill by WI was stopped. People became aware what was happening, and even motorists stopped in horror as they watched deer fall to their haunches. A neighborhood was transformed into a war zone with state police helicopters hovering above spotlighted bait sites. I have a video that demonstrates WBI's killing techniques, filmed by a hidden camera in March 2004 in Metro Park, Akron, Ohio. After viewing it, several area veterinarians testified that the deer did not die quickly, as claimed by WBI, and extreme animal cruelty was involved. Whether you hate deer, love deer, or feel indifferent, what you see on that video should be unacceptable to anyone. I have a police report about 6 seized cameras by rangers at Metro Park. The cameras were returned to Steve Hindu of the group Shark in Illinois. They were damaged, the videos erased. In this report, DeNicola admits to persuading 2 rangers who have full police status to allow him into the evidence locker and to tamper with the evidence, a felony in Ohio. Later, he refused to confirm or deny this to the Akron Beacon Journal. Right now, a case in federal court is charging DeNicola with evidence tampering and animal cruelty. Is this how Greenwich wants to become famous? Be known as the first town in Connecticut to host a deer massacre and for hiring a group that is legally suspect? Wildlife isn't owned by the town. Legally, it is held in public trust for all people. Does the town of Greenwich have the right to decide for all its residents without public forum, using taxpayers' money to appease a special interest group who raised $60,000 for the deer study? I would also like to know whether the permit from the DEP has been issued at this point.
30
If it hasn't,
seconds.
why is this issue even being considered at this point? Thank you.
Dana McCavity to be followed by Lynn Garfinkel.
Good evening. I can see that there are a lot of people on both sides of the fence with I love deer, I hate Lyme disease. I think we have a lot of unity on that one point. I just would like to share with some of you part of the financial end for the town. I've had also experiences with Lyme disease, 2 children who were easily cured and 1 who was not. And as a result of my son's illness and disabilities, the town of Greenwich Department of Education has had to provide services for my son ever since he was 5 years old. These services included numerous special testing sessions, individualized educational plan meetings, planning and placement team meetings. Every year that he was in school, he also required self-contained special education, for which the price tag at Eagle Hill School right now is $30,000 a year. He is now free of Lyme disease, I think, and but he remains with many cognitive deficits and still requires at the high school every day a private resource room teacher, 9 days out of 8. That means one day he gets it twice, as well as speech and language therapy and numerous IEP and PPT meetings. So when you compare what it has cost the town of Greenwich to take care of my son, the price tag on this proposal seems very small.
Thank you. Lynn Garfinkel, to be followed by Jim Boutel.
I have approximately 30 years experience as a humane educator. I've done anti-cruelty investigations, and I'm also an investigator into animal issues, which means I research things that are of interest to me that don't seem to make sense, or they offend my sense of reality. Now, hunting is one of these issues, and especially the proposal of white buffalo is one of these issues. Now, I can tell you with a great deal of certainty that Howard Kilpatrick of the DEP, whose name was mentioned earlier by another speaker, knows with great certainty that regular hunting will not reduce the population of white-tailed deer in Greenwich or anywhere else, in zones 11 or 12 or anywhere in Connecticut. He knows this, but he will not say this because Howard Kilpatrick is beholden to hunting interests, and he must maintain his position in his job and with the hunters. Now, as far as taking 200 or 300 deer out of Greenwich, this is an absurdity. Not only is this a waste of money, a waste of time, but we now have the films, which some of you saw in the lobby, which are blatantly inhumane, and I will state that, and if Mr. DeNicola wishes to take that up with us, he's invited to come here and see the films with us. These practices cannot be supported. They offend the common sense of decency in this community, and I would urge the RTM members to seriously consider taking a break from this issue for a while, reconsidering this. I know that the hunters claim that they can remove the population of deer, but because of the reproductive physiology of deer, this is a literal and physical impossibility in the town of Greenwich. It is true that hunting reduces numbers of deer temporarily. White buffalo can do this. They can take out a couple hundred deer at a huge price. The hunters can do it just as well. However, bow hunting is just as inhumane as the practices of white buffalo, and our hunter friends are aware of our view in this matter. It seems to me that these issues need to be looked at scientifically by delving deeply into them and asking yourself, if there's 3,500 or 4,000 deer in Greenwich, taking out 200 deer is going to do what? It's going to please the people who may have excess deer in their private property or something like this, but it will not do anything for the town of Greenwich. And as far as the Lyme disease issue, 80% of the total population of deer would have to be removed, according to a Harvard study of many years ago, in order to have any effect on Lyme disease whatsoever. And I sympathize with the families of Lyme disease children. I have survived Lyme disease myself. I'm happy and healthy, and I will start a movement against white buffalo here in this community. Thank you.
Jim Boutel, to be followed by Richard Holleran.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, let me just preface my comment by saying I, too, am one of those that got touched by Lyme. 5 years ago, I went out to see my mother, who's in the back country, and found her on the kitchen floor, having suffered what I thought was a stroke. She, in fact, had Lyme disease and severe Bell's palsy, which is a paralysis of one side of the face, caused by Lyme disease. The youngest bridge child, Sammy, who played baseball for me, whose family was the donor of one of the gifts tonight, suffered from Lyme disease at 14. It got into his brain. I had seen him at 12, 13, 14, 15 as a ball player, and I know how it affects young people. Having said that, this proposal, what hasn't been sent tonight, but I believe I heard in committee, is the White Buffalo proposal is an unsolicited proposal to the town. That it is my understanding that the town did not put out an RFP, that this is a proposal that came in an unsolicited nature, and I think we need to be aware of that. More importantly, I learned my lesson about 10 years ago when I convinced our Board of Estimate and Taxation to return a $1 million grant to the federal government, thinking we were doing the right thing, and learned to my dismay how the media, and particularly the New York media, will react when the town of Greenwich does the right thing. So through you, Mr. Moderator, my concern here is that we are being asked to vote for a certain amount of money tonight, but you'd better be prepared to spend more money on police overtime. We're going to have protesters. We're going to have people trying to get in and get hidden video. It's been talked about as part of the plan that there will be police control. We're now hearing in the middle of the night. I read that as overtime. That is not part of the financials of this proposal. I will not be surprised. I am actually surprised that we don't have more media here tonight. Because if we vote for this proposal tonight, I fully expect it to be reported in the New York media that Greenwich has gone out and hired somebody else to do our dirty work, is how it will be reported. And that we can fully expect an ongoing black eye from this. As I said, I know deer is a problem, but this is an unsolicited proposal. I'm not sure that it's the right answer at the right time.
Richard Holleran, to be followed by, and I'm not sure the name, it looks like Audrey, perhaps Spelling. Mr. Holleran.
Mr. Moderator, Richard Holleran, District 1. I rise to oppose the Deer Management Consultant Program. Deer, these magnificent creatures have been here since before European settlement. Increasing encroachment for human residences and other uses have intruded on their ancient paths and habitats. Especially of concern are the stone walls and fences erected to keep deer from human-sponsored vegetation. Because of such obstructions, the stone walls and fences, more deer may be led to use and cross over roads that might otherwise be the case. More alert drivers moving at lower speeds will certainly mitigate against car and deer collisions. The killing of deer mommies, babies, and adolescents, and the occasional daddy deer by persons paid by tax dollars of Greenwich taxpayers would seem to be of dubious merit. Baiting of deer, mesmerizing them with floodlights before dispatch, only draws attention to the bravery of those whose purpose to be hired by the town to carry out this program. I am sure that their courage in the face of these various adversities will exponentially increase as they proceed with the task at hand. Mr. Moderator, I propose that these services to the town's Conservation Commission, these servants of the town's Conservation Commission, be awarded town medals for valiant endeavor in the face of adversity and suggest that we name these awards the Bambi Medal. Thank you.
Audrey Spelling to be followed by Elizabeth Campbell.
Hi. I live in Greenwich, and yes, I like deer, and Lyme's disease is quite a threat. However, I think we really got to look at the people that we are hiring to do the job, okay? I really think that we should investigate their methods and their means. We, our people in Greenwich, want to do things as humanely as possible, and I really think that we have to question if this is a really humane way of doing it, or these people practice these methods as I seen on the tape. The other thing, as far as Lyme's disease is concerned, yes, it's carried by the rodents, by the birds. We can go on and on. Killing 200 deer, I don't think, is going to solve this problem or issue. The other thing, just real quick, tick habitat. There's so many people coming up here about ticks, and I think they know what they're saying. However, leaf litter, heavily wooded areas, wooded areas surrounded by broad tracts of cleared land. Leaf litter provides a moist cover from wind, snow, and other elements. Research has shown that removal of leaf litter can drastically reduce tick populations by more than 70% and up to 100% in some areas. Ticks find human host from the tips of the grass and the shrubberies, and the leaf litter attached to, of course, us. So maybe we can do a little more research before we hire these people, and maybe clearing up some of the tick habitat that's there. Don't forget, we're not going to start culling mice, and we're going to start culling birds. People are moving into Connecticut for what? To look at the deer, to look at the turkeys. Are we just going to get rid of everything? We've got to really think what we're doing, and hopefully there are intelligent people here in Greenwich that can really seriously look at the management in a much better way. Thank you.
My name is Elizabeth Campbell.
Hang on 1 minute, please. Elizabeth Campbell to be followed by Hans Helbig.
Elizabeth Campbell, RTM member, District 5. There are deer problems in Greenwich caused by too many deer. The reason for their overabundance is that through land development, people have taken away their habitat, a place where they naturally live. The deer manage the best they can, indiscriminately eating domestic plants and acclimating themselves to residential properties. If they could think like us, they might move to northern Maine. But they don't think like us, and the proposal to bait 200 deer in February out of season and then kill them at night with spotlights, violating hunting regulations, presents a playing field insufficiently level to be acceptable. These violations are possible only because the state has recently passed legislation allowing towns to violate hunting regulations after they apply for and get a permit. Our Q&A handout states, quote, DEP has only recently come out with draft guidance on this procedure, end quote. Greenwich has applied for a permit but does not have one. I urge you to vote against number 11 for the following reasons. And here this is more a matter of process. Part of this is the process. Residents need more information, including alternative solutions, and they should be able to give their reaction and input. This item is a big deal, one which is very upsetting and acceptable to many. The 4 members of the committee report, the town officials involved, and the BET may not present an accurate opinion of Greenwich. There should be a town hearing on deer management, and specifically on the predation culling. I do not feel the RTM should be asked to vote on this item until a town hearing is held. 2, our material states that White Buffalo will conduct a birth control study following the killing. This study should be done before proposing the deer kill. 3, Lyme disease is a very, very horrible disease. However, I don't think we should be under the gun to let this thing go on in 6 weeks. I really hope that all of you will vote, you'll think about this, and I hope that many of you will vote against this, because I don't think this body is capable or qualified to vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Mr. Helbig?
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, good evening. All I have to say about this whole thing is that instead of a proposed study that was mentioned here tonight, of birth control of deer, what about a crash program study of stabilization of deer the humanitarian way, instead of a cowardly, cold-blooded killing of innocent deer? This item should be turned down and be studied. Thank you.
Further discussion on item 11? Mr. Detchen, District 10.
Mr. Moderator, I come from the Midwest, and in the Midwest, the wildlife conservation commissions out there basically stabilize the population through hunting. And they regulate which type of animals, male or female, can be harvested from one year to the next in a very careful calibration. The problem we have here is that we have an unnatural situation. We can't use hunting alone in order to regulate or stabilize the deer population. We don't have the right conditions, the housing's too dense, and therefore we have to come up with other means. I think it's important to realize that this culling concept is only part of a larger plan. The idea here is to cull on this property, on the public property, but also to encourage hunting on private property, and subsequently to try to introduce birth control schemes, although those birth control schemes are not currently legal or not permitted on a wide-scale basis other than except in research circumstances. The irony of this particular situation here is that probably this culling by a headshot is probably more humane to the deer than the chest shot of the deer, bow and arrow, or even with a deer rifle. What we need is all of these particular programs. We really do not want to have hunting on public property during the daytime. We don't want hunting there. We have to do this at a time in the public property when there are not public citizens on the property. That's why it's being done at night. That, frankly, enhances the safety of this particular culling. But I think it's unfortunate to view this as something in and of itself. If we just do the culling, it won't work. It has to be combined with the hunting methodology and with other ways to stabilize the population. The deer tick matter aside, frankly, the deer collisions on the road are a danger to human life. Someone sooner or later is going to get killed here in our community by collisions with the deer. And we need to find some way, frankly, to reduce the population to a stable level so that by various means, and not just by culling, we can in fact keep the deer population under control. We do not have a natural situation here. If we don't take action, then we're not going to basically get the situation under control. It's difficult for the town, frankly, to push the idea of hunting on private property if the town itself is not willing to undertake some means to try to cull the population on public ground. Thanks.
Thank you. Arlene Lamazzo, District 6.
First, let me thank Mr. Detchen for that wonderful overview, which I totally agree with. I came here tonight intending to vote for this item for two reasons: the safety issue, which Mr. Detchen so clearly articulated, and the health issue. Those two things were very important to me. However, I've heard two things tonight that disturb me. One is what Mr. Boutel said, that this proposal came from the outside into us, and I'm not saying it was wrong for Denise and her staff to take that proposal seriously and see if, in fact, they could implement something that would be helpful. At the same time, Karen Sada-Khan said, because of the allegations we have heard about inhumane treatment of the animals, and we know all sharpshooters don't always hit the mark, I'd like to suggest that if, in fact, we move forward with this, what I consider an experiment at this point, that someone like Karen and perhaps 3 or 4 other members of the RTM witness and maybe even film what takes place here. I mean, we need to know, if we're going to do this, even though it's experimental, we need to know what the real facts are, and I think someone ought to be an observer in this case. Thank you.
Doug Wells, District 2.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't intend to speak on this article, but just a couple of things I'd like to say, just so that I can alienate more than half of you. Not only am I a lifelong Red Sox fan, I'm also a lifelong deer hunter. So I just want to say, yeah. So I just want to say a couple of things. Number one, the idea of filming this and going out with this group is silliness. I've hunted all my life. There's nothing humane about killing an animal. If it's something you choose to do for a purpose, then it's humane. But there are going to be animals that are going to suffer in this process. You have to look at the larger view to see whether this is what you want to do. And I think that the people you've heard from and the incidence of Lyme disease and what it's meant to family makes you realize that this is a first step. People are right, even the Friends of Animals are right to say that this 200 deer being killed is only a first step. We've got to combine this with the people from GSLA, have the town work with ways in the community to let people open up their area to hunting. I don't hunt here. I go to Vermont because the atmosphere around here is so hostile to hunters that I don't do it. But I think we've got to create a situation where people open up their land so these deer can be not eliminated, but reduced to the point that we can have some safety and diversity.
Well, for next hunting season, you can go out and buy a nice red jersey with D. Wells on the back. Further discussion on item 11. Elizabeth Campbell. It has been moved and seconded that item 11 be postponed to our January meeting. Discussion on the motion to postpone. I'll call for a voice vote, this being a procedural matter. If you are in favor of putting this off to our January meeting, you should vote in favor of Ms. Campbell's motion to postpone. If you want to proceed with the vote tonight, you should vote no. All those in favor of the motion to postpone item 11 to our January meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. That motion has failed. Is this a motion for the previous question? Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards item 11 and proceed to poll your delegation? While we are voting, we have one final item. That is item 17. Mr. Wells. Doug Wells, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, this is item number 17 on the call. Resolved that the rules of the RTM be amended to add a consent calendar. It is as it appears on the call.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 17 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Wells?
This item came before our committee to consider whether we should extend the...
Mr. Wells, hang on 1 minute, please. I'd ask that the voting on item 11 please be conducted quietly and that attention be paid to the speaker on item 17 so we can finish with business of the meeting. Mr. Wells?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This item came before our committee to consider whether we should extend the use of the consent calendar for our town meetings. The consent calendar that was passed last year had a one-year sunset provision and therefore would end by its own terms after this evening's session. Our committee first addressed the issue of whether the language in the consent calendar is so tortured as to make it not decipherable. We therefore decided after reading the provision that a comma should be inserted in the third line after the phrase district chairpersons, so as to make it clear that it's the moderator that designates the items that are to go on the consent calendar as opposed to the committees and the chairpersons from the districts. That motion was carried by unanimous consent. We then took up the resolution as revised. If this resolution is passed by our committee, it will remain in effect indefinitely unless there's further motion to amend or to rescind it. Our vote on this item was 11-0-0 with District 11 absent.
All right, so you'd like to make a motion to amend by adding a comma in line 3 after the word district chairpersons?
Yes, sir.
All right, is there any objection to that amendment? All right, that amendment may be adopted upon unanimous consent. Discussion on item 17. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item 17, and proceed to poll your delegation? That being the final item on our agenda, we will need to await the results of the vote before adjourning the meeting. I would like to wish everyone a happy and healthy holiday. Thank you again, Paul Kurt and Jenny Larkin, for your fine work tonight in taping the meeting. We have the result of the vote on item 11, which is the appropriation of the funds for the deer control. Those in favor, 112, opposed, 65, abstaining, 7. That item has carried. We have the result of the vote on item 17, the RTM consent calendar. Those in favor 169, opposed 0, abstaining 1. That item has carried. There being no further business to come before the meeting and absent objection, the meeting stands adjourned. Thank you all for coming, and again, happy holidays to everyone.